Okay, so basically, as you can see, I started off my build with a Google search. Because I've never done this before, I was hoping to find some inspiration online and maybe learn a few tips and tricks. I had a general idea of what I was after, but needed to get to a final design that would suit my needs and also fit well with the room. A big factor when deciding on the design was the fact that I wanted to keep the costs down to a minimum, but also the alterations brought to the wall since I'm renting at the moment, so I don't want to make my landlord too unhappy. I figured a few screw holes can be easily patched up and then covered with a fresh coat of paint when I move out. All in all, this bit only took me about 10 minutes, and as you can see, this was the design I settled on. I did, however, end up bringing some changes to it, since during the search I got my creative juices flowing and I came up with the idea of trying to integrate some sort of lighting to it. Previously I had an RGB LED strip running along the plinth at the bottom of the wall, but I knew that it would not work since the pieces of wood would be extruding from the wall, thus blocking the light spill in various places. I ended up doing a screen grab of the image and then I had it imported into Photoshop. I then selected the actual artwork and tried to straighten it up. During this process I also did a quick edit of the image so I can get a better understanding of how adding my lights will change the look of the wall. This is when I decided to extend the lower middle rectangle and make it equal to the one above and turn them into the main focus of the wall. I thought that a second color that would go well with the blue would be yellow, so instead of having them painted in yellow I made the call to keep them white and add a yellow light to the edges of the rectangles. So this means two things. The first one, having the light reflected off the white means that it will not change its color, and secondly, it gives me the possibility of turning off the light and altering the overall look of the wall. Now this bit took me about 15 minutes to do, and once I had a final design that I was happy with, I went ahead and saved it down as a JPEG and then I had it imported into SketchUp. Now in here I went ahead and quickly put together a room that was a 1:1 size to the room that I was going to have this feature wall built in. I then overlaid the image I did in Photoshop. I made some quick adjustments to make sure it fits perfectly on the wall, and then I had it centered. Then it was time to start laying the virtual wood strips in place. Using SketchUp is really useful for a project like this, since it helps you to visualize what may cause issues in the real world. You can try and work them out without having to spend any money, and also it saves you from the frustration that you would otherwise experience. It also helped me with figuring out how many wood strips I need and of what length. During the actual build, it also came in handy when I needed to double check on spacing between the wood strips or distances from the wall and such. Now, this part took me about 50 minutes, but I am sure that it has saved me so much more than that by having a clear picture in my mind of what needs to go where. I then had to quickly go to the hardware store and buy the wood strips and also the paint. Luckily, the shop is only about 7 or 8 minutes from me, so I was in and out in just under 1 hour. So after only 2 hours and 30 minutes, I already had a design, the materials needed and a plan in place. It was time for me to get some hands-on work. Now, as you know, walls are not always perfectly straight. The same applies for ceilings and floors, so the very first thing I did was to mark the center of the wall, as I would then use it as my main reference point to the virtual design I did. You see me here double checking distances and comparing them to the data I had, and also having my laser level angled so that it would give me the main position in the angle of the center wood strip in my design. Using some masking tape, I transferred that to the wall so that I could go ahead and turn off my laser level. Here you can see me checking the wood strips for straightness. I wanted to make sure I'm using the best ones for the middle section of the design, which are the longest strips, so any big bends in these would be very easy to spot. I had all the strips split into 3 stacks, the best ones for the middle section, the OK ones for the longest side strips and the really bent ones for the edges of the design, since those are the shortest that I'll use. It was now time to finally take off that LED strip. Since the rectangles in the middle will light up from the edges, I wanted to try and hide the new LED strip as much as possible. Therefore, I made the decision to cut some channels in the sides of the wood strips. This meant I had to temporarily fix them in place, mark where I would start and end my cuts, and then take them off again and down in my garage, where I would actually do the cuts. As you can see, I have some DIY sawhorses that I built following some YouTube tutorials, and that also applies for the circular saw. I picked it up for about 35 quid a while ago, and I just had it stuck on a piece of old wood chip panel. The cuts I get with this are just amazing for a DIYer like me, so I couldn't ask for more in my case. But also, you could just skip this part altogether and have the LED strips applied directly on the face of the wood strips. Now, you saw me adjusting the depth of the cut to 1 cm, and that is because the LED strip that I will be using is measuring about 8 mm in width. For the other side cut, I kept the same measurement of 10 mm, and that was only to make things easier for me and also do it a lot faster. If you make a deeper side cut, you'll make the LED strip even harder to spot, especially when you're close to the wall. After doing all the cuts down in the garage, it was now time to head back inside. Again, I started installing the wood strips from the center and slowly worked my way towards the edges. This time, I had them installed permanently, so at the end I also applied some wood filler to cover up the screw holes and also the joints. At this point, it was around 7 o'clock in the evening, so I was happy I was done with all the knocking and banging in the walls. I'm sure my neighbors were happy as well. The wood filler I had hardened really fast, so after a quick sanding I was ready to prep the wall for paint. I started masking off the side walls by using some wrapping paper that was only about 30 centimeters wide. Now this was a mistake, as in some areas I managed to overspray. Looking back, I should have used a wider one, maybe around 50 centimeters in width, or maybe even some of that plastic foil that you can buy at hardware stores for only a few quid. I've used the paint spray gun for this, but you can just use a regular paint roller and a brush. If you do that, I would suggest painting the wall before you install the wood strips and only use a brush to paint the wood. This will help you get full coverage around the wood, especially if it's not fully dried, as in time you might start to see the old paint around the edges of the strips. After masking off the middle sections, I was ready to apply the paint. I've had my spray gun for a while, but never used it before, so you'll see me having no idea of what to do when things don't go as they should. Even though I followed the manufacturer's instructions, I found out by trial and error that I needed the paint to be thinner and also used a different nozzle. So after a while, I managed to get it working. Well, sort of. By the time I was finishing painting, it was about 10:30 at night. So all in all, it took me about 12 hours and a half, including a half an hour meal break. All that was left to do now was wait for the paint to dry. I started off early the next day and I was really excited to see how it turned out. I really like to try and fully enjoy things, so I started off by unmasking the sides first. I figured that when uncovering the middle bits, that's when I'll get the full-blown effect, and I wasn't wrong. The white revealing itself from within the blue created a nice, pleasing visual contrast. I couldn't have been more happy at this point. All that was left for me to do was to install the LED strip, but since this is an optional personal preference, I decided to not count it as part of the actual build. But if you insist, unmasking and installing the LED strip took me just about 2 hours. So that adds up to a total of 14 hours, start to finish, for completing this feature wall. The LED strip I've used is actually a warm white COB LED strip. The LED chips are closer together than regular LED strips, and they have a diffusion layer applied on top. The result is uniform light emission that creates an interrupted light cast on the wall. The light intensity can also be adjusted, so this means that it can serve as a design feature when adjusted at its lowest setting, but also as a light source at its brightest. After plugging in the power source and connecting the lights, my feature wall was now fully completed. And with a few final touches, the room really came together and it defined its personality. Okay, so time to get to the financial part now. I started off thinking that a 10 pack of timberwood strips would be enough, but after measuring in SketchUp, I realized I would need 2 more pieces. The screws to fix them in place were only a few quid, and the same applies for the wood filler. Next in line is the wall paint. Here I went for a rather dark blue, and a can of this paint set me back £25. Lastly, almost as expensive as the wood itself, was the LED strip. Prices on these may vary depending on the manufacturer, color, and so on, but the one I went for was just over £43. So the grand total for this is £129.12. Now some may think that this is not a budget project, but personally I think it's worth every penny. It completely changed a simple, boring room and gave it a classy look and feel. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I hope you enjoyed this short video, and above all, I hope you're now inspired to go and do your own. Till next time, stay safe. Bye.